Is there a lot of anxiety around people trying to get pregnant now?
We talk about like the first 1,000 days and those being so important to a child's kind of later development.
Right. Children don't listen to what you say, they watch what you do.
I kind of take that role in our relationship, trying to go that extra mile for my wife. And when I can't fix something, it's really frustrating.
It's a very man thing.
Whatever you're doing, your child will pick up on that and they'll start doing similar things.
There's maybe like 1 or 2 times in 7 months that I've seen my mates.
I'm just going to bring it back to that very first question that I asked. Is anyone ever ready to be a dad? Hey everyone, and welcome back to episode 3 of The Men's Manual, a podcast designed to get real men talking about real problems that they are facing and common concerns that the modern man has. We're trying to create a community that supports every man with the challenges that they face on a daily basis. I'm Shaun Stafford, I'm your host for today, and what we're going to be doing over this series is talking to a lot of really interesting guests about their own personal experiences and the challenges they face, whilst also talking to an expert in that field to help us all understand those issues a little bit better. In this episode, we're going to be discussing fatherhood and the impact that has on your health from a dad's perspective. Having a child is a huge event in the life of both parents, and it has an impact both physically, emotionally, and psychologically. So we're going to be asking ourselves the big question: are you ever ready to be a dad? Today, I'm being joined by Alex Hobern, who is a manual customer, but he's also the winner of reality TV show The Circle. He owns his own social media agency called Flint, and I've known him for a while, and he is, I can confirm, a new father. Welcome to the podcast,
Thank
Alex.
you for having me. Is it that obvious that I'm a new father? The bag's under my eyes.
Do you know what? You actually look great for being a new dad. For a bit of context, how old is your child? So you've had a son?
Yes, a son. He's 7 months old.
Okay.
It's been quite a wild ride for the last 7 months. It feels like a lot longer than that, I'd say. An eternity.
I'm also joined by child psychologist Dr Mollie Higgins, who works with young families to really ensure the well-being of the children. She's going to be offering her expert insight into the important role that a father can play in the development of those children and the role they play in the wider family. Mollie, welcome to the podcast. We're super excited. As two dads, we are desperate to hear what you've got to say to be able to help us be better parents.
Help.
Thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to hearing what comes up and kind of hearing your experiences as well of being new fathers.
Yeah. Well, Shaun, how new are you as a father?
I'm not so new.
Okay.
I've been in the game for a bit. I've earned my stripes. Yeah, my kids are 8 and 3.
Oh, okay. So you've got some of that experience then.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay.
So now's probably a really great opportunity to shout out our tag team partners in this debacle that we call parenting.
Yeah.
So obviously it's a huge event for a man to go through, but I think it pales in comparison to the actual process of, and this is even before the child is born, going through pregnancy, the ups and downs that you have with that. How did this impact the relationship that you had with your partner?
Yeah, it completely changed how I saw my wife. I think when you see somebody go through that, how I see women in general, I think even just how incredible the human body is.
Yeah. The
things they have to go through, the highs and obviously low lows that you go through in pregnancy, and then with the big event happening of birth and how crazy that can be. It really kind of gave some perspective and appreciation for women everywhere, but particularly my wife as well, and just to see how strong somebody can be in that instance. And I guess it's just like a biological thing, but also how you take it, your attitude towards it. And I was just completely in awe of her, I think, during that time.
Did it make you feel differently about your own mother?
Yeah, no, 100%.
Yeah.
That's such an interesting question, actually. It made me, and even like post-birth as well, I check in with my mum a lot more.
Yeah.
Because I know how I feel about my son, and now I have a son. I'm like, my mum must still be feeling that, but just like 50, 60. Well, actually, she's not that old, but slightly older, 30 years older than me. Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a common thing that you see with the families that you work with, but after seeing my wife and what a sort of legend she was around pregnancy, around the childbirth, and then in those kind of, you know, in the thick of it when the baby arrives and having to deal with all of that. And then thinking of my mum, you know, going back however many years for me and my brother, and my dad was away a lot, and I was thinking she did that all on her own. And it just, it was a level of sort of admiration. And I think as sons, we do get a little bit complacent about the roles that our mothers play in our own lives and all that they do for you, all that they sacrifice for you. Is this a common thing that you see with the families that you work with, that the relationships between the women in the family unit change?
Yeah, I think so. And I think what you just said is so interesting about how your relationship with your own mother changed. And that's something that's come up quite a lot in some of the work that I've done, that actually, you know, it gives a new perspective on how that must have been for your mother and your parents to go through that. So I think it does. It changes how you view the world, and your relationships with other people in your family.
And also like what's important in life. It's just like, it's suddenly, you go from being like this trailblazer, workaholic, crazy thing to suddenly having something, but from both mine and my wife's perspective, that you just like, nothing else actually matters other than that. And I think parents will often say, you know, they've reflected on their own childhood and they could kind of understand, oh, that's why my parent maybe responded like that. Now they've had that experience themselves of being a parent. Actually, that makes sense maybe that, you know, they were feeling that way or they responded like that. Until you're in it, you don't know, do you? You can't really experience that fully. So yeah, it definitely changes your perspective on lots of things. 100%. I think one of the biggest things that I found from just being a new dad, and I think this is where hopefully I can get some insight from you, Shaun, and how you dealt with it, is its disruption on your personal life, particularly fitness. Yeah. I can clearly see you're a very fit guy. How do you stay fit as a dad? That's just the first thing I want to know. Yeah. Because I'm struggling.
But I think it's one of those things where it's such an upheaval in your life and your routine, right? And I think some key pillars of health, well-being, fitness are underpinned by sleep, right? Sleep is a foundational pillar of well-being, and it's probably the one that is impacted the most when you have a new child. Also, you've got I think as a dad, we take on a lot of pressure and a lot of burden in that relationship. You know, there's a lot of the time the mum is the one that is the central figure in that new relationship with a child, because the child is so dependent on the mother, and therefore a lot of the time the dad feels like they've got to do the rest, and they've got to kind of keep the wheels turning on the rest of it, while almost mum is out of action and looking after the new one that's joined in. I think guys put a lot of pressure on themselves to, you know, keep going as it was, when really you don't need to. You can cut yourself some slack. You can be, you know, appreciative of the new role that you have within the family dynamic, but also to know that it's okay to not be operating and functioning at the levels that you were BC, before children.
That's good.
I like that.
because quite frankly, it's two different phases of your life. And I think putting pressure on yourself to perform and act and behave in the same way that you did before children, when you have children, is just completely disconnected from the reality of what being a dad is. When people talk about, you know, how do I stay fit? How do I maintain a level of health? It's anchored in routine, right? It's usually getting up at the same time, going to the gym at the same time, having a jigsaw of healthy habits that all kind of fit together to make this picture of health. And I think as soon as you throw something as unpredictable as a child into the mix, but also not just unpredictable from a child point of view, your wife, your partner will also be having a level of unpredictability about her. There's a lot of hormones, there's a lot of, you know, you're going to be confronted with issues and problems that as a couple you've never dealt with before. So that almost that routine and those little habits that you've put together that all form your idea of what health is, just get exploded.
Yeah, that's true.
And I was wondering, I don't know if you can maybe give us some reassurance about how it might change as your children get older. I think you're obviously still quite early in that fatherhood journey, aren't you? And, you know, it won't be like that forever. You will have times when actually things do feel like they're a bit more structured. You have got a bit more of a routine, and you can start to maybe do things slightly differently. I don't know if you've got to that point now where it does feel like there's more of a routine, and you can maybe look after yourself in similar ways to before child.
Yeah, it's 100% that, as in every day, every week, every month, you get a micrometer back to where sort of life BC, you know? So it's one of those things where as they age, you do slip into these new routines, or you form new routines that cobble together a new picture of what your health looks like. And also with your wife and with your partner, like, you are a team, and keeping sort of a level of and a focus and one eye on your health really drives and underpins your overall well-being, and support each other with it. I know that my wife and I used to tag team. So she'd go for a run, I'd look after the baby, we'd come back, we'd high five, we'd tag team, we'd pass the baby over, and then I'd go and do my thing. And it's one of those things where one of the great things about being a parent is it really reinforce the relationships that you have with your partner and your significant others as well, because you can't do it alone. And you've got to support each other through it. And having one eye on well-being means that you're going to show up as a parent in the best possible way, because if you're unhealthy and you're sick and you're unwell, you're not going to be doing the best job as a parent. So it's one of those things where having one eye on well-being is absolutely critical to the longevity and the sustainability of that relationship. So Alex, what was your initial reaction like when you found out the news you were going to be a parent? And is having kids something that you'd thought about? Is it something that you'd always wanted?
Yeah, I always wanted kids. It's something that we were like actively trying to achieve. So it was a really good thing once we found out that we were pregnant, and we'd been like pursuing that. To be fair, I don't know why, but for some reason, I'm not sure whether it's just because like social media is really structured in this way, but I was under the impression we'd struggle to have a child or to get pregnant. And I think that is reflected in probably the content we consume as people as well, is that you like to consume the content where like perhaps there's more negative skew to it because it engages you. If with all the content you consume is like, I got pregnant after a month, you just wouldn't watch it. But these people that are going through these long struggles, and I think that's the headspace that we were in as a couple when we were trying, was just like, Millie was like, she's 30 and she was like, I'm getting old.
Yeah, and we are getting, people are having children later in life now, aren't they? And I think that comes down to lots of things, career and just the way that society is kind of structured now. But that can really increase the anxiety that people are feeling around, should I be doing it sooner? Am I going to run out of time? Particularly for women, they do really feel that pressure to do it soon. What if I'm leaving it too late? And it's difficult because anxiety can also impact, our physical health and how we are able to conceive. So it's a bit of a vicious cycle, really. If we're feeling really worried, then we're less likely to be able to, put our body in that position. So it's tough.
I think trying to navigate the modern landscape, right? There's so many factors that are potentially here today that maybe weren't there when we were growing up.
Yeah.
My parents, their biggest concern probably for me was that I'm out playing football in a t-shirt when I should really have a jumper on because I'm going to catch a cold. Whereas now there's social media, there's, are they getting overstimulated by screens? Is there bullying in the playground? All this sort of stuff. I know that some of that was around when we were growing up, but it just seems like there's a cauldron of different things that we need to be worried about. And how does that impact the way that you think you're going to be as a parent? Have you had these conversations with Millie about parenting style? Have you set some rules early doors? I know your little one's only 7 months old, but
yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. Even at 7 months old, there's so many things to consider. And maybe you'll be able to shed some light on this, but things like screen time is something that as a couple, like we're in our parenting styles, we're aligned, but there's certain things that we do just as people, and it's like habitual that we've realized because of him, like screen time, looking at your phone. Even at 7 months old, he gravitates towards phones. And I think it's because he's seen us using a phone. He can't talk, obviously, but he's seen us using phones. And as a result, he reaches for the phone, wherever it is, even if it's upside down, it's off and it'll be on the other side of the room. He'll have all his toys here and he'll go towards the phone. And that just really put into perspective for me how dangerous like technology is. So I'm trying to do this bit of a digital detox at the moment where I don't have my phone around him and stuff, which is difficult because obviously you're trying to balance work and life and all of those things. But as a father, I feel that's like a responsibility.
Yeah, and I think what you're touching on there is how children learn from the people around them. And we know that children learn behaviours, how to manage their emotions from the people closest to them. So whatever you're doing, your child will pick up on that and they'll start doing similar things, which is a lot of responsibility, isn't it? Whatever you're sort of showing your child, the behaviours that you're doing, they'll learn through doing that. What we call social learning theory is literally children learning how to do things from the people closest to them. So you're right, if he's sort of seeing you reaching for your phone, sort of doing that, then that will be his natural response to start doing that as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's thinking about how you sort of balance that, I suppose, and how you bring in those more positive behaviours or the things you do want him to be doing, because children will model what you don't want them to do, but they'll also model what you do want them to do. So I think, yeah, you've definitely picked up on how he's kind of learning even in those early months.
Something that I've started doing without making it a joke, but I've actually started like getting a book and having my phone on the inside of the book and like pretending like I'm reading something really intellectual, to disguise from him that I'm actually looking at my phone or like reading emails or replying to emails and stuff. And I don't know whether it's actually having an impact or not, but I'm hoping that when he can read, he'll be like, my dad reads all the time. Little does
Creative.
he know.
But there is that saying, isn't it, that children don't listen to what you say, they watch what you do. Right? And so if you want your child to have good habits and that sort of stuff, it's really important that you are the role model from that point of view. When something that you touched on earlier in one of your answers, and I just want to ask you the question, like, how important do you think it is as parents to have those conversations before the baby arrives about aligning on certain issues and having those conversations, which can be really challenging around value structures and how you are going to parent? Like, do you have a strategy of how best to tackle those conversations between partners?
Yeah, I think you're right. Having those conversations early on is definitely so helpful. Like you've spoken about, once baby's here, there's so much going on. You're trying to navigate this whole new world. You don't get a manual. You don't get any instructions about what you're meant to do. It's better if you can have those conversations before, and thinking about, like you said, what are your values, and how can you sort of negotiate, I suppose, and meet somewhere in the middle. Because I mean, you've said that actually you and your wife are quite aligned maybe in your values and your parenting styles, but it might not always be like that. And for some parents, it is really thinking about, how will we respond to our child doing something that we don't want them to do? What will our expectations be? And having those open communication and those conversations as early as possible really is so important. So yeah, we would definitely encourage that.
Have you had any clash points? Have you and Millie sort of disagreed on anything? Because I know from personal experience that being a man and being a father and having boys and your idea of potentially how you want them to behave and act and what sort of parenting structure you put out for them might be very different to that of a mother who just has a different perspective on it. Have you guys clashed at all with that?
I wouldn't say it's a clash. There's some things that like happen and I'm just like, and I'll have a differing approach to it. Say, for example, if he rolls over and bumps his head on something and my wife reacts like, oh, poor baby, blah, blah, blah. I often wouldn't. I'd be like, he doesn't know that that's a negative thing. Unless he's like in pain, which often he's not. Sometimes I see that as like almost providing him the association with that being negative. And I would just be like, oh, don't worry about it, man. Woo! Like, and I think that might just be a different in paternal to maternal instinct. Like my instinct is always just to like play fight and rough and tumble and do all the boyish things that he loves, because he laughs his head off when it happens. But then when he's with his mum, like I'll often be with him for 3-4 hours in the morning, and then she'll come in and he'll start going, "Wah," and you're just like, hang on a minute, you didn't make one squeak when you were with me the whole time. And I think that's just like almost a human nature type thing, that she's a provider of safety almost, and I'm like the fun guy. That
is a real thing. I've read that a few times, that I think children, especially in early development, they view the mother as that safety care, whereas the fathers are usually the fun play guys. What's the kind of science and theory behind that?
I suppose we've spoken a bit about those early days and the mother kind of connecting with their child in a slightly different way, maybe. So for a mother who's breastfeeding, they're going to be spending a lot of time with their child, aren't they? And that's quite a soothing interaction between mother and child. And actually, as a father, if you're not so involved in that, then it can leave you feeling a bit sort of, what is my role here? Where do I fit into all of this? And I think you're right. In some ways, fathers kind of take on that role of being maybe the fun one, providing like more of the practical support, whereas the mother might be involved in the caring part of things, the soothing. But actually, it doesn't have to be that way. We can start to like notice times where the father can take on that role. But I think, it's not unusual to see fathers kind of taking on that fun, and you spoke about like play fighting and all of those things where you're the playmate maybe, but actually consciously switching it up can be really helpful. Fathers can provide that support as well, but there's something about doing it which maybe doesn't come as naturally, I suppose, is what some parents might find.
And do you find that there's like almost does that get easier as they become more kind of coherent and conscious as children rather than babies?
Yeah, I think so. But it's also around, thinking really carefully, what can I do to maybe create that bond and to provide some of the care in the same way that maybe mother does. So when children are young, you spoke about like not maybe wanting to pick them up and soothe them when he's sort of rolled over or something. But actually being able to do that shows your child that, I understand how you're feeling and I'm here and I can receive that. I'm not just trying to suddenly make things better. I'm noticing how you're feeling. And that's what we want to be doing for children when they're really young. And I suppose, it comes from when they're really young, how we talk to them, the way that we speak to children. I don't know if you've heard about parentese, which is sort of the way that, how we talk to children when they're really young. We kind of use like a sing-song voice, and we're like high-pitched, and we elongate our syllables a little bit. And it can feel a bit strange doing it sometimes. And I think maybe as a father, even more so. But actually, there's so much research into how that supports children and their kind of emotional development. We would definitely recommend kind of doing that type of thing from a young age. Finding those opportunities for connection that aren't just around play and, like you said, those more practical activities.
Yeah, interesting. And I think having a dog helps with that baby voice stuff.
Yeah. I mean, it's a similar thing, isn't it? Yeah. And I think it does come fairly naturally, or it does for me anyway, you see a child and you don't talk to them like, the way I'm talking right now. You kind of change your voice a little bit. But there is, there's lots of research behind why we do that, and how that makes the child feel. They're not, we say talk to your child when they're young. Your child isn't going to remember what you say to him tonight. He's not understanding the language, but he'll remember the feeling, and our bodies kind of hold on to that feeling. So it's about providing that sort of reassuring, warm, nurturing space for them from a young age.
That's so much to consider, because like I always worry. Well, I don't worry, but sometimes I'm like, when does he cross over that line into what you're doing is actually making an impact on him as an adult? Do you know what I mean? There's memories from my childhood that I'm not particularly like enthusiastic about, and I'm like, where's that limit to, like, when do I stop swearing around him? Which obviously I'm trying to limit now, but that's difficult. Things like that. When is it that you, and this probably is like getting prepared to be a dad is quite a big thing, I think, like learning how to control your anger, and things, because suddenly you've got now another set of eyes that's looking at you in the corner. And if you stub your toe and you go, and you go bright red and start smashing things up, I don't want that to impact him, or to same with arguing with your partner, which is completely normal, but how do you do that in a way that's like respectful and not raising your voices? And
and I don't know if you'll like the answer, but we would say sort of, from the beginning, and actually from pregnancy, so really starting to consider early on how you're kind of interacting with each other, how you're responding. We talk about like the first 1,000 days, which starts from conception, and then it's sort of the first 2 years of a child's life, and those being so important to a child's kind of later development. And of course, there's going to be times where you swear or you do something in front of your child that maybe you'd rather not, but it is about kind of having that awareness and just recognizing that they pick up on everything, and they pick up on sort of the mood and the environment, and they really are responsive to what's happening around them from a really young age. And that isn't to say
this is really
you've got to change things completely, or to like shame parents who feel like, oh, actually I have sworn in front of my child, or we have had an argument in front of the baby. But starting to just be more aware of that can make a huge impact.
I think it's also, the children don't exist in a bubble that only has you in it, right? So there are circumstances in their day when they will experience things that potentially you might not want them to experience. They might hear somebody swear. Like, I remember the first time my son was go-karting and he crashed into someone, and the kid turned around and called him producers, get ready to bleep this out, a f***ing idiot. He goes, you f***ing idiot. And my son found it hilarious and just went round. He told everybody that day that when he was go-karting, someone called him a f***ing idiot. And it was pure and simple. We just say to him, and he understands it, we know you found it funny. However, you're not old enough to be saying that word. It's inappropriate. Yeah. You can't say it until you're 16. And therefore he goes, okay. And he knows not to say it anymore. So it's like one of those things where as long as you've got that communication and that just honesty around the situation. Was it funny? We all found it hilarious.
And I really like what you did there, like saying to your child, oh, that was really funny. You're acknowledging it, aren't you? And sometimes I think, parents would say, oh, stop saying that, or you need to stop saying that, and immediately kind of go in with the don't do this thing, but actually acknowledging, what, that was quite funny, and I can see that you found it funny, and then giving the boundary, but you can't say that until you're 16. Don't know if that's going to happen, but it's being everything in our household is 16. Okay.
Everything that he sees mum and dad do that is wrong is like, it's okay, like swearing, arguing, whatever. You can't do that until you're 16. And he kind of just knows. Alex, so earlier you said that you often take the role within the family unit as more of the rough and tumble, playful character. How would you feel if you embraced more of the caregiving sort of role within the family unit?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I mean, I do try. I think the struggles that I've had on that front are probably around not that he's breastfed, right? Not being able to provide that feels like I saw that little twitch. Not being able to provide that feels like almost like a handicap. Like I can't provide as much care because often that's what he needs, is like that he'll be beside himself, but if you feed him on the breast, he'll just calm right down. I do try, and there's been times where you're just like trying to nurture them and care for them, but I am a massive softie, and I think as he gets older and can communicate better, and I can communicate with him, that's where I'll kind of come into my own. And obviously I will try and start that. I do try, but it's often unsuccessful, I would say. The soft approach. But if I do the rough and tumble, that's where I can get kind of that interaction with him. He laughs and it's very positive and things. But often when I'm holding him, he wants his mum. If it's in a soft way.
And I suppose you are building a connection, aren't you, through those playful interactions that you're having with him. But I just wanted to touch on what you said about becoming, a soft parent, and as he kind of grows up, becoming softer. And I think there's this real worry for parents, and particularly fathers, that being a soft parent, if that's what we want to call it, will result in soft children. And actually, when we talk about kind of soft parenting and gentle parenting, we're not saying just let your child do anything, and just say that everything's going to be okay and sort of fix everything for them. That isn't what we mean. It's more about kind of recognizing how they're feeling, and really empathizing with how they're feeling, and being able to support them with that, rather than my child's just able to do whatever they want and I'll let them. And I think that's the sort of difficulty sometimes. People hear about kind of gentle parenting and this soft parenting approach, and they think, well, no, I need to make my child tough and resilient, and they need to be able to advocate for themselves. But actually the way we do that is through recognizing their emotions, really being able to notice how they're feeling and empathizing with them. So there's definitely, a real role for that kind of soft and nurturing approach.
And I think as a dad, you can definitely be both. And I think as a mum, you can definitely be both. Like you see my wife when my kids get on the wrong side of her and she sets the boundaries in a very clear way. Yeah. And they do not want to get on the wrong side of mum when she's angered. So it's one of those things where I think trying to fit into a box of potentially what masculine and feminine is, what paternal and maternal is, I think necessarily doesn't fit people in today's modern society. I think we all have to wear two hats, and this is going to sound really sadistic and slightly wrong, but when my kids cry and they want dad, it's one of the most satisfying things in the world. Obviously I'm sad that they're sad, but like when they put their arms out and they're crying and they've hurt themselves and they run to you and they want to cuddle, it's the nicest feeling in the world. But I also know that when my son asked my wife to go and play football in the garden, that's also really, really nice for her to take that role. So I don't think it's one of those things which is hard and fast, this is the role for a dad, this is the role for the mum. I think certainly with the way that family dynamics are playing out, especially in today's day and age, it's much more dynamic and much more flexible. Yeah. And children need both, don't they? And they need consistency. Like children thrive on consistency. And actually, if they're getting a fairly sort of similar approach from both parents, then that's, the best thing for them. We talk about, don't we, like good cop, bad cop. And actually, we kind of want to give them the same message from both people. So being able to balance that and take on both roles is really helpful.
Super interesting. And I think that, as you said, like parenting has changed so much from when my parents were parenting, and definitely from when their parents were parenting, like World War II or whenever it was. So I think those constructs of like what a strong like dad is, or I feel like I haven't experienced any pressure to be that way in the modern day, and I think it's just probably becoming more and more fluid and interconnected with just being a parent and just being like a responsible person for your child and trying to bring them up in the best way possible, whatever that is. So here's a question that I want to ask both of you. So how do we go about raising the next generation of men, and do we think that our parents got it wrong? Oh, do we think our parents got it wrong? I wouldn't say that on a podcast that my mum can see.
No, but everybody kind of thinks that, my parents did this and I don't want to do that, right? So we're kind of intrinsically, you said it earlier about we always hold on to the negative element of any situation. And a lot of the time you say, oh, my parent did this, or my mum did this, my dad did this, and I'm not going to do that when I'm a parent. So we automatically think, despite all the wonderful work that our parents did to get us to this place, that there are elements that we would do differently. So, do we think that our parents got it wrong, or do we think there's a better way of doing it?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, from my perspective, I think that I came out okay.
Jury's out.
The jury's out on that one. But I came
that guy on the circle, mate, he doesn't like you very much.
Yeah, it's true. I wouldn't want to. Yeah, I don't think I can comment on my parents' parenting style. Like my biological father could probably definitely learn something from me. He was, unfortunately, he like struggled from addiction and passed away when I was young. And my experiences of him and that time aren't great. But my mum and my stepdad, who I now call dad, they did a really good job, I think, of both me and my brother. And I don't think they got it wrong. And their style was very classic, I think, of that period. Like my mum is a super soft maternal figure. My dad was like a businessman and was like, it's quite, I'd say more serious, obviously lots of fun as well, but more serious, and it worked. And both me and my brother have come out great. But I think that neither of those styles reflect what me or my wife are going to provide for my child. And as a result, that can cause conflict as well, because the grandparents are still in the life and they still have those elements within them, and their styles. And you're just like, guys, like it's changed a lot since like 30 years ago. Things have changed, and that's what I struggle with, I think. And I presume, I'm not sure what your experiences are like, but that's what I struggled with.
I think they were doing what they could with the knowledge that they had and the resources that they had. And like you said, we just know a lot more now. We know a lot more about like child development. We know about how parenting has such a huge impact on who we are as we grow up. So I think, we're in quite a privileged position in that we have more knowledge and we can use that hopefully to kind of help us a bit. So I feel like maybe they weren't doing it wrong. They were doing what they could. But we've definitely moved on, I think, in terms of how we raise children and the ways that we might approach parenting.
Sure.
And I think every parent is just trying to do the best that they can with what they have.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. That there's no guidebook, or there is, but they're not, I don't think they're very good. But there's no real playbook for how to parent, because every child is different, every person is different, every parent is different. So I think if we were going to try and create a guidebook or create a framework of how to raise the next generation of young men, what might that look like?
Big question. Okay.
Big question.
I think I touched earlier a little bit on how we respond to our children's emotions. And that is so key in raising emotionally resilient children. So often, and this is both mothers and fathers, we want to fix things for our children, right? We want to make them feel better. We want to make sure they're happy. We want to reduce any feelings of like sadness, worry. And that's fine, that's normal, that's always going to be our response. But we also want to acknowledge how they're feeling. So instead of, oh, you don't need to worry about that, or, oh no, don't be silly, that's not important. Actually really noticing for them, I can see that that's really hard for you. And this is obviously when they're a bit older, they have that understanding of language, at 7 months, he's probably not going to get that. But as they get older, it's really being able to empathize with the emotion and label that for them. And what we know is that for children where the emotion is labeled for them, so an adult saying, I can see that you're really cross, their amygdala, so the bit in their brain which is basically controlling all of their emotions, starts to fire less. So that part of their brain just isn't as active. And that bit of their brain is what's involved in like fight or flight, that sort of immediate response when they feel like they're in danger. So actually just naming the emotion can reduce that feeling of threat and of fight or flight. So that's like the first step in helping children to be aware of their emotions and to recognize what's going on for them, because we just can't expect children to grow up and feel emotionally resilient if they don't recognize how they're feeling. And then I guess the second part of it is like teaching them ways of managing those big emotions. It isn't about, right, let's just shut down all of the negative or uncomfortable emotions. It's about sitting with them when they're feeling that and, noticing it's really hard for you right now. And we can talk a bit more about, emotion coaching and how we might do that. But we want to be showing our children, look, this is what we can do instead when we're feeling cross or we're feeling worried or we're feeling sad, whatever it might be. So part of that comes from what you do as a father and as a parent when you're feeling big emotions, because they'll observe that and they'll do something similar. And then the other part of it is like explicitly teaching them, what can you do instead of throwing your Lego? or whatever it is, teaching them those strategies when they're feeling calm so that they can use them later on. So yeah, they're the kind of two parts. We want them to recognize how they're feeling and then be able to sort of manage some of that. And I guess one of the things to really consider when, you know, you are a new parent is how you manage your own emotions and how you kind of regulate how you're feeling. Because children will pick up on what we're doing. And like we spoke about earlier, they will model and they'll copy what you do as an adult. And it's really helpful to normalize emotions for them. So to show them that actually, look, daddy gets upset too, or daddy gets angry, and that's okay. And this is how I can deal with it. So having like your own coping strategies and showing your child, look, the emotion is okay. And that's really what we want to teach children, that all emotions are okay. Any emotion, anger, sadness, worry, it doesn't matter what it is, we accept all of those emotions, but we don't accept all behaviors.
Right.
So the separating the emotion and the behavior is really important. And we show that to our children through our own responses as well. So what do I do when I'm angry? What do I do when I'm upset? Let me model that for my child. And I guess on that as well, like you were talking about earlier, we're not going to get it right all of the time. There will be opportunities where, you know, you shout or you get annoyed at your child. Of course, that's going to happen. But what's really key, and I think someone touched on it earlier, was about how we acknowledge that with our children. Look, daddy was really cross earlier. You know, I got really upset or I got really frustrated, and I'm sorry for doing that. You know, you explain to your child the emotion that was there. And then you kind of repair that with them. So again, you're modeling, this is what happens when I feel a big emotion and this is what I do. And that can really support children to, you know, be able to regulate their own emotions.
Super helpful. I'm going to be trying to do that. Is there any recommendations on the behaviors that you should associate with that? Or is it just up to the parent? Like if anger was, if you take anger as an example, my way of dealing with anger is probably to like internalize it and take it out in the gym. Like, how do I portray, like, what is the best practice, or is that not as clear as that?
To show your child that
like
you're feeling
anger,
angry,
or to show what behavior should they be doing with anger? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what is the template for that, if there is one, or is there not?
I suppose it will be different for each child, and it will be different depending on their age, their developmental stage, and obviously adults will process and manage anger in different ways to children. I think it's a bit cliche, but we often talk about breathing, and sort of activating our parasympathetic nervous system. So we want to help our body to feel calmer. If we're talking about anger, we want to really help our body feel calm. So teaching children, you know, ways of breathing, things like bubbles can be lovely because, you know, I don't know if we can. I don't think you can angrily blow a bubble because you've got to, do you know what I mean? You've got to kind of slow down your breath, haven't you? They might be a bit frustrated whilst they're doing it, but it's showing your body, actually, I'm safe. You know, that it's giving that message. So teaching them things like that can be really helpful. And same for parents as well. You know, it does sound a bit cliche to say just take a deep breath, but actually there's so much research around how that gives messages to your brain, and it helps you to kind of stop, pause, not immediately react. So yeah, I suppose that's kind of one example of how you might help children when they are feeling that big emotion, and do it with them as well. Do
for
it
sure.
Alongside them, they can see that you're doing it. Do it together.
Coming back to like the struggles of fatherhood, that is something that's also a struggle, is that when you're, I have to be careful how I put this, the women have gone through this huge thing, and also they've got like maternity leave in some cases, and have that time at home. By going to work, it's almost seen in our case sometimes like I am having time out. So I go out, I leave for work, and I go into a very stressful environment for the day, and I come home and she is equally as stressed and goes, there's the baby. And then you've got the baby and she has a break and some time off, very well, hugely deserved. But where's my break? Because I've gone from waking up, been given a baby to deal with for 4 hours, gone to work, had the stressful day, come back to the baby, obviously to try and do that. And then I go to sleep. And it's interesting what you say about friends, because there's maybe like 1 or 2 times in 7 months that I've seen my mates, and that's, I haven't lost any connection with them, but I think it's seen because in our case specifically, because and it may be different in other relationships with the mum going out or the dad having more time, whatever. When the person leaves the house and the baby's at home, you're seeing like you're taking a break, but you're actually just dealing with the pile of other stuff that you've had to put on hold. Then you come back and neither of us get a break. Right?
I think this is a really common and important part of this conversation.
Yeah.
Certainly from a guy's point of view, but also just in the dynamic of a family unit, as in I've had this conversation countless times over the last 8 years, where it's a case of going to work or leaving the house, going to work is seen as a break, which I think in the atmosphere of having a child, you know, they're on you all the time and they need attention all the time. So that is such an intensity of emotion and responsibility and dependency that you going to work, having to answer a few emails and interact with some colleagues, adults, by the way, having to interact with adults, which, you know, when you are glued to a baby is premium, right? As in you crave interaction with other adults because you're goo-gooing and gargling something that for the first 9 months gives you not a lot back apart from a smile and a fart. So I think that interaction, and especially between mother and father, potentially at home, at work, it's a real source of, I don't know if resentment is the word.
I was just thinking, similarly, to be honest. I think it's something that comes up a lot, and lots of parents that I speak to, they do feel a bit of resentment because and I think what you've said is so right. They have an idea about what the other person is doing maybe, and it doesn't always match up. And where do you find your break, and where do you find that time for yourself amongst all of this? It's really tough. And I think we spoke a bit earlier, didn't we, about the communication and having those conversations. And I guess, you know, what I was saying that we should do with children in terms of recognizing the emotion, we need to do that with each other as well. So with your partner, you know, recognizing the difficult bits that they're holding, and then also, you know, the difficult bits that you're having to manage as well. But it does make it really challenging. Sort of balancing those roles, going back to work. And I guess I was also thinking, when you were talking about sort of seeing friends and that social aspect of things, about how important that kind of community is when you become a parent and when you become a father, and whether, you know, you have any sort of father friends and people that you can connect with who are sort of experiencing similar things to you, because that can be so helpful to know, you know, I'm not doing this alone. There's other people who have maybe gone through it before me and they've kind of come out the other side, and having people who get it, I suppose, and you can say to them, actually, I'm finding this really hard. You know, what shall I do?
Well, I was the first in my friendship group.
Okay.
That's probably where that limit is. But you go to like the antenatal class and you've got that kind of like group of lads.
I was about to say the NCT group was certainly for our first child was so crucial, because it was a WhatsApp group for the guys and a WhatsApp group for the girls, and the WhatsApp group in the middle of the night, every 2 hours, ping, 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 ping. And then the WhatsApp group for the guys at 10 in the morning when they're at work, with ping, 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 ping. Because as you said, you're experiencing this situation, this event in such a different way, that having somebody who you align with, whether it's the other guys in the NCT group or the other mums in the NCT group, that are living it, breathing it in the exact same way that you are at the exact same time. And that's the thing with NCT, you're all having the baby pretty much in the same month. So you'll be really aligned. The chances of all your mates having kids at the exact same time is very, very unlikely. So having that support network of something like NCT, I'd say that was probably, if someone was to ask me, would you recommend doing NCT? You learn a lot about when you go into labor what you do, which is important. But I would say that the support network that it gives you is it trumps the knowledge indefinitely.
Yeah. And people that are out of the trenches, so to speak, aren't helpful. Do you know what I mean? Like anyone that's had a kid 3 years ago, and they're like, yeah, that was the same for me. Nice.
And they'll give you that unsolicited advice as well, won't they? They'll tell you what you should be doing, and you'll think, no, that won't work for us.
And then they go to sleep and have 8 hours and wake up and text you all sprightly, and you're just like, what?
Where are your bags?
Yeah.
Where are the bags under your eyes?
Yeah.
Exactly.
You need someone, don't you, who's going through it alongside you.
Yeah, which has been super helpful. I think that's, as you say, the NCT group has been like really, really helpful, and particularly for my wife as well. I there's no doubt she's got it harder than me, particularly with the sleep, the physical nature of parenting, being there carrying, like, she's like 5'2" and he's a weight now, and she's carrying him around all day. Even that alone is mad, because like when we see the grandparents, sometimes they like go, oh, my back, I've got to lift him up, and you're like, Millie's been carrying him for the last 7 months in every which way, carriers, hands. So the physical and mental aspect, she has it far worse, and I think that support group has been vital for her. But as men, perhaps we shy away from it sometimes a bit more, or don't have the same connection with the group because we're working, because we're still busy.
Would people be honest on that group? Would they say, you know, I'm finding things really hard, or, you know, I'm feeling low? Would men be open about it?
Yeah, not so much in the group conversation, but directly people have come to me. If I've put something in there like, oh, yeah, he's struggling with X, and then you get in a conversation with them one-on-one, that's where I think it... Yeah. And perhaps that may be, I don't know, that may be a male versus female thing. Maybe women share more in groups than men, but
I think in a group setting, in a pack setting with guys, you just need one person to give permission to be vulnerable.
Okay.
And then as soon as that happens, floodgates
everyone's
open.
Okay.
I think if everyone's like, how you doing? Yeah, great. Yeah, okay, everything's going fine. Yeah, cool. You gloss over it, because I don't know whether it's a level of machismo that exists where you don't want to be the one that says, do you know what? I'm actually finding this really tough.
It's vulnerable, isn't it? It's a vulnerable position to put yourself in, and you don't know the response that you're going to get from doing that. Yeah. So if you put in that, you know, I'm finding this really hard, and the response isn't what you'd hoped for, then it shuts it down a bit. My experience is use vulnerability as your superpower, because I think with men and in an environment where there is a level of masculinity at play, I think being vulnerable just cuts straight through it. And I think if you're confident enough and you're vulnerable with people, the authenticity that comes through with it, and if you need support and if you need help, you'll be surprised if people aren't just willing to bend over backwards for you, especially because they're probably waiting for somebody else to show a little chink in the armor of, do you know what, how many people have, you know, thought, how come nobody else is struggling but I am? That's when really it's just nobody else is talking about it. And you can acknowledge it as well. You can say, you know, I know that everyone's maybe balancing lots right now, but, you know, I need a bit of help with this. And you know, it doesn't have to be about someone's got it harder, or, you know, something's more difficult for someone else.
And I think that, unfortunately, that was like a big thing through the pregnancy journey as well, because I wanted to run around to literally everyone I met and be like, we're pregnant, took 2 months, like buzzing. And you're always worried, particularly like fertility, parenting, things like that are really unusual, because you never know what somebody else's experience is or has been, because no one talks about it. So I wouldn't know. I brought it up on the podcast about getting pregnant in 2 months. I wouldn't know if either of you had struggles with your fertility journey, but I just said it. And like, even if I'm in a group setting, I would be really reluctant to talk about it, because I've seen the other side and how much people struggle. And that's something that I've found quite tough. And it's the same with parenting styles, like putting it out on social media, being like, oh, co-sleeping with your baby could cause a ruckus. Some people might have experienced cot death, or some people, and it's just like, where do you draw that line? Where do you just say, look, whatever, this was my experience, I'm going to live it and own it and talk about it openly and freely, and where do you dampen down your conversations to make sure that you sort of tiptoe? And I think it's probably like a reflection of modern day society. Everyone seems to be on edge at all times, because there's so many things that are issues that need to be addressed and haven't been resolved. That's just, I feel like I just shared there.
So this has been an incredibly interesting and insightful conversation. And I'm just going to bring it back to that very first question that I asked at the start. Is anyone ever ready to be a dad? And what are the best things that we can do to safeguard our own mental health, physical health, and well-being as we prepare to become a father?
Are you asking me now as a dad or before?
Either or. As in, this is just
I
a free
thought
conversation.
I thought I was ready, but I don't think you'll ever be ready. You've just got to live it, in my opinion. I don't. If you did take all the time to get yourself actually ready, you probably it'd last a lifetime. I think you're just going to have to learn on the job, in my opinion.
I agree. I think if you were waiting until you got to the point of being ready, it would probably never come.
Yeah.
There'd always be something else to read or something else that you could try and figure out. But actually, like you said, you do figure out things as you're going. And until you're having that experience, maybe you wouldn't feel completely ready. But there are obviously things you can do. You can reflect on your own experiences as a child and how you were parented. You can start to think and have those conversations about how you want to parent. What are your values? How do you want to raise your child? What kind of things do you want to do? And like we spoke about, being able to regulate your own emotions. Being a parent, being a father is so tough. And if you feel like actually you can't regulate your own emotions and you can't manage how you're feeling, then it's unlikely you'll be able to manage how a very small person is feeling. So being able to sort of manage that before maybe you think about starting your parenting journey is probably really helpful. But also, if you're on that journey, then considering what can I do to help myself manage some of these emotions a bit better so that I can support my child.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Like, I think we all learn on the job as parents, and I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done before, during, and after the child arrives, on yourself and obviously as a couple and with the baby. But it's one of those things which, despite it being super difficult and hard, it's also, and you'll know this, it's one of the most rewarding, joyful things. As in, when people, I have a dog, and this is probably going to get me hate mail from the RSPCA, but if, like, before children, like if somebody asked me, how much do you love your dog? I'd say, 9 out of 10. 9 out of 10 for my dog. She's great. Maggie's great. But then you have a child, and how much do you love your child? Well, if I love my dog 9, I love my child 1,000,000. It's a different type of love, and it kind of makes all the work that you do on yourself, on your relationship, and then once the baby's here, it kind of makes it all worthwhile. And as you kind of alluded to earlier, when it comes to restructuring what's important to you, you put that front and center.
100%. It's like a biological different. I think, I've got a dog as well, and it's a similar thing. It's like when you see them, the feelings that you just receive from parenting is just another level. And it must be biology, because I've never loved anything that much. I don't think.
What an end. Okay, so it is the time in the podcast where we dig out the little green book. This is the men's manual. Every episode I ask our guests to offer one piece of advice or one nugget of information that they can offer to the people listening. And we're going to write it down in this book. And then hopefully, when this podcast is a huge success, we're going to take this to publication, and we're going to all live off the royalties for a lifetime. So Alex, I'm going to ask you the first question. If you could, give any piece of advice or any nugget of information or knowledge that you want to go in this green book, what would it be?
I think for me, the focus would be around, and this is probably just because of this podcast, actually, that I've kind of had this epiphany around balance. Like, something like balance is the key to either happiness or like successful parenting, I think. And that's from balancing your own life in terms of work, lifestyle, children, parenting, etc., but also balancing the way that you approach them after your advice around like managing your emotions and gentle parenting and things like that. If you try and balance everything, then you probably will be okay.
Lovely.
Yeah.
And Molly, if you're going to write something in here, a nugget of information for all the dads out there, what would it be?
Recognize how you're feeling, I think. Recognize your own emotions would be my sort of takeaway for any parents, fathers listening. If you can't do that, then it will be really difficult to manage your child's feelings and to support them with their feelings. So Notice and manage your feelings.
Amazing.
Right. So I think that is all we have time for. This has been an incredible episode of the Men's Manual. I want to say a massive thank you to Alex Hobern for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Have you enjoyed it?
It's been great. Yeah, it's been really good. It's also been like very eye-opening. So I'm going to have to watch this back and take notes, I think.
Amazing. And also a massive thank you to Dr Mollie Higgins for joining us and offering so many unbelievable insights from a child psychology point of view, but also from those little tips and tricks on how to really effectively manage a family unit. For those of you guys that are interested in finding out a little bit more and hearing some more of the expertise of Mollie and her work with families, stay tuned for the next episode of XY, a bonus episode on fatherhood, where we're going to try and geek out and dig a little bit deeper into some of the topics and discussions that we've had today on the podcast. So all that leaves me to do is say a massive thank you from myself and the team at Manual. It has been a pleasure to have you guys listening. As always, in order for this podcast to be heard by more people, please leave us a comment and a rating and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It's been amazing to have these conversations, and we can't wait to have you back listening to the Men's Manual next time we release an episode. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again soon.